Land bridge found and natives abound. I am, as always, your host, Christopher Paul Dugdale, NEDNA. We're at Duncanville High School in these United States, and today is September 8th, 2020, the first day of school. On this date in history, in 1974, Gerald Ford pardoned Richard Nixon. On a personal note, back on the 4th, my parents just celebrated their 49th anniversary. So let's have a great year, everyone. This class starts from the very beginning, so as you can see, I've started off with a blank screen. So uh, that's all the time we're going to get on that, but I hope you enjoyed that. If you did, then this is going to be a lot of fun this year. If you didn't, well, it's the last blank screen you'll see, unless your computer's broken. So we're going to go ahead and start off with Pangea, okay? There's this theory that at one point the entire world was one single continent, and that there were all the seven land masses were one big chunk of land, and that continued. Uh, well, that's still the prevalent idea. So continental drift brought us to the shape of the world that we know today. Now, uh, things that we can prove: the land bridge, Beringia. Original inhabitants and crossed from Asia 35 to 40,000 years ago. We really don't know the time. A lot of these things are guesses. The thing you've got to remember with any type of history is its interpretations, and sometimes not all of your dates are really the dates when things that actually happen. Now, we know that people cross by on land because annually, well, not annually, but almost every year, all the water between Alaska and Siberia, the uh, the easternmost part of Russia, it will freeze over, and you can actually walk from Russia to Alaska. I'm not telling anyone to do that because I don't want to be responsible for your deaths, but uh, it was something that you could do. So they make the trip across, and then slowly over the next thousands of years, they start dispersing to North and South America. Now, the pre Columbian native population was somewhere between 50 and 70 million. Now, many of you, who are writing down your notes, which probably isn't a bad idea for you to do because you have to learn how to organize your notes and your thoughts. You're just going to write down those without thinking, but think about how worthless those numbers really are. 50 to 70 million, that is a major difference. Okay. Now, if we're talking 5 to 7 millimeters, you're not going to really notice a difference in this. But if I'm talking about 5,000 to 70,000 miles or people, there's a major difference in trying to be able to find room for everyone. And so whenever they come up with those numbers, it's a guesstimate at best. So one of the things you do need to know about history is it's not an exact science, and things that we cover in class, they could uncover new information to find out that some of the things that you learned were wrong. You'll find that most of the things you were taught in elementary school had been dumbed down, or uh, a lot of the information taken out of it because they didn't want you to deal with at a young age, or they didn't think that you were what's the word, that you were old enough to be able to handle what kind of world that you live in. Now, North American Indians, okay, Native Americans, the indigenous people, okay. Now, for some reason, people want to try and group everyone into one big group, but the truth is, in North America alone, there's at least 240 distinct tribes, if not more. I've got some of the largest ones on the map to the left. There's about 10 million people that live in North America. Most of them are agriculturally based, but they live all throughout, mainly in the areas around major rivers and major water areas. Uh, some of them will farm. There's trade that goes on that really takes place in the Mississippi area, and the trade will connect Central America and Northern America, just like it does once the Europeans take over. There's also the fur trade, especially up in the northeast. and that's going to be up near the Great Lakes. Uh, Trapping animals will actually trap things almost to the point of extinction. The beaver up in Detroit was actually extinct for over 200 years until about 3 years ago. So I don't know if you find that interesting, but it is true. So deal with it. This is Teotihuacan. Now, this at one point was the world's largest city. This is located about 45 minutes outside of Mexico City. I took a bus there back in 1997. I paid $2 for a round trip ticket. We rode on an air conditioned bus, and I got to watch a movie in English with Spanish subtitles. Now, this does not belong to the Toltecs or to the Aztecs, possibly some of their ancestors, but the civilization really will disappear around the year 800. Uh, you see on the top left-hand side, that's a picture taken from the Pyramid of the Sun. The Pyramid of the Sun's also on the right, but on the picture of the left, you can see down in the distance, you can see the Pyramid of the Moon. That's on the left-hand side. Uh, you can see kind of the outline of it on the back of the mountain. Uh, but you have the world's largest city at the time based in Mexico. Now you have the Aztecs. The Aztecs were a group of people that everyone hated. They had this magnificent capital called Tenochtitlan. It had about 200,000 people. They sacrificed thousands of people at a time. Because they were unliked, they were forced onto the worst land possible, which was a swamp. Uh, Instead of going there to die, they started doing these floating platforms that they started farming off of. They were able to produce so much food that they didn't have to farm most of the time. In fact, within a few months, they could grow enough food for the entire year. And so then they used the rest of their time to go and pillage and destroy and kill. There were somewhere between 5 and 20 million people. Again, that number should sound awful to you. You know, if it doesn't, then, well, crap. I mean, seriously. You've got 5 to 20 million. That's a major range. If I told you you were going to pay $5,000 to $20,000 for your car, I think you'd probably want a better idea or a better range of what I was actually going to pay. The Mayans, they were only a civilization for about 750 years, from the year 500 to 900. They're the first people on Earth with the concept of zero, and since that's been taught to you from a very early age, I don't know if you understand just how remarkable of a concept it is to come up with the idea of zero. They have an advanced math and calculus. Uh, their calendar, which is the picture on the left, the round thing. Don't ask me how it works. I have no idea. It's said to be more accurate than the calendar that we use in modern times. Architecture was so advanced they built buildings that would help you see events that took place only every 7 to 10 years based on the rotation of the stars and the moon. So uh, you'd be able to look out a window and that would be the only thing you could see. They were overpopulated and they destroyed themselves. They're much more like the Greeks with city states than they were any type of united nation or people. They had a shared language, they traded with each other, but they also fought with each other all the time. The Incas, they had elaborate roads. That's all I'm going to say on them for now. They're based out of South America. They're really the largest tribe in South America, and we'll get to why the elaborate roads made a difference in. I don't know if that's next class or the one after, but we'll figure it out soon. The Anasazi, they are in the southwestern United States. That's what SW means. So they were mainly in New Mexico and parts of Arizona. They built their civilization really into the cliffs, and some of them you can still see today. They irrigated fields. They made their homes out of clay and mud, and that's basically what we make bricks out of today. They did dry farming. That's where you plant seeds deep in the ground, but most people believe it was because of droughts that they're dispersed by 1300. Despite the fact they had dry farming, then you still have to have a nice water source for the people to not die of thirst. Dying of thirst is something you really don't want to do. The Dana Hopewell Indians. These are based in the southern Mississippi River Valley. They did these really elaborate burial mounds. If you look at the picture at the top, you can see really the shape of what looks kind of like a snake with a swirl at one end and a triangle at the other. There was a division of labor, so everyone did different jobs to make the community work, and they were responsible for trade throughout the continent. Okay. Cahokia is based out near St. Louis. They had dirt pyramids, they were mound builders, and they had about 20 to 25,000 people. They did not discover it uh, until really the early 1900s because these dirt mounds in the shape of pyramids looked a lot like mountains until we had airplanes fly over and they looked down and thought, that looks like a very square mountain. And for those of you who aren't specialists on mountains and pyramids, pyramids are differently shaped than mountains. I'd get into more, but since you're not a specialist on it, then this will go way over your head. The Algonquins. They were a tribe based out of New England. They were nomadic. They fished. Some of the best fishing grounds of the world are based off the coast of Newfoundland. They also hunted and farmed. The Iroquois, most people are more familiar with them for the confederacy that they built up, which a bunch of nations that joined together for a military alliance. Uh, One of the strange things about them, or not strange, but different things about them, was the fact that they were not a patriarch based society. They had men and women both hold very important leadership positions. Uh, they ran more of a democracy, choosing their chiefs. And if you got married, you moved in with your wife's family. You didn't move in together off on your own. So that's very awkward, critiquing the way that you treat their daughter. So, yeah, that's weird. Anyway, it's weird to me anyway. If that's Anyway, I'm going to go ahead and move because I've just talked myself into a corner. So, now moving on to Europe because people have to get over here. Eric the Red is one of the greatest real estate agents of all time. He found and named Greenland, and he named it Greenland even though it was a big hunk of ice. He did have a son by the name of Leif, and if you know anything uh, about the origin of names, it's also known as the etymology of a name. Okay, and for instance, if you are Norwegian, in many cases you get your last name from your father's name. So he was Leif Thorvald Eriksson, or the son of Eric. If you know anyone by the name of Johnson, then that means that, at some point back in their family line, there was a man by the name of John who had a child, and so that was Johnson. And any other name that you see with the name son on the end, it goes back to the same type of thing. So that's the etymology of the name. You meet someone with the last name of Baker or Miller, then they were Bakers or Millers. Okay. So he found Vinland. That's really off the coast of North America and Newfoundland. If you look at the map right above, you can see that. I found that in about 1001, and a lot of this was a folk tale because there was really no way to prove that he'd been there. But in 1963, in Leon's Meadows, really in the island of Newfoundland, they found some artifacts that they could trace back to the time where Leif Erikson was alive. Now, in the 1950s, there was a map that was found that showed all of Europe, and it also drew it also had a line for the coastline of the Americas. And Yale bought this map for a total of $50,000. They put it on display. And so they did a test of the ink, and they found out that the ink, was it was over 900 years old. So it seemed like a legitimate map. And so they put it on display, and people go and they see it for a long period of time. And then there's some people that have some questions about the legitimacy of whether or not the Vikings actually discovered the New World or not. So they went ahead and they tested the ink on the left side of the map, and they found out that it was only about 200 years old. So Yale actually spent a lot of money on a map that was not the first map in the world to ever show both the Americas and Europe on the same map. So if you found that interesting, then great. If not, then you are bored out of your mind. I'm going forward. So the Crusades. So a lot of this has to do with the spice trade. Okay, and so the Pope makes it possible for Europeans to conquer the Holy Land or Israel. So a lot of people volunteered to go and fight and free that land. It was said that if you'd sinned, that if you went there and you died or you helped liberate the Holy Land, that you would go to heaven or your crimes would be forgiven. It was a way of saving your soul. In doing that, they started reintroducing spices. Okay, these are food. These are spices used to preserve your foods. These are also types of medicine. So anyway, this kind of changes the world and this changes trade because then if you look at it, if you can go over there and you can get spices, you can charge a lot more on the way back. Spices are pretty easy to carry. And let's say that you came back with about 4 or 5 decent sized bags of sand, that might make, or not sand, but salt, then that would make you a fortune. Okay. I don't know if you've ever heard the saying, they're worth their weight in salt. It's because salt was very valuable for preserving food. So, Marco Polo, you might have heard him in some games. He goes on a 20-year trip through Asia. And when he comes back, he brings back a lot of spices and a fortune. In fact, he makes a ridiculous amount of money, but it takes him 20 years to make the trek, and he walks somewhere around 30,000 miles altogether. Okay, some of the spices he brought back were cinnamon, pepper, nutmeg, clove, ginger, mace, perfume, and all types of medicine. Okay, he also brought back silks. Okay, and when people saw the fortune he made, they wanted to do it themselves, so many of them made the trip overland. Some of them made it by water, but the trip took so long, and you also have to think about all the supplies you need to make such a long trip. So, reasons for exploration around from 1347 to 1353, the 1447 to 1453, you have an outbreak of the bubonic plague. It kills 1 out of every 3 people in Europe. Okay, 75 to 200 million people. Basically, beyond what they thought the coronavirus was going to do to us right now. They realized that they needed some new resources, and also because of all the positions that were available because of death, people had a lot of new opportunities. Also, in 1453, you have the fall of the Byzantine Empire. And so all this information that had been stored there by the Greeks is released, or not by the Greeks, but by the Romans in this Greek city. It's released to Europe at this point. And people start looking at the world in a much different view. With 1 out of every 3 people dying, you have some people that rush back to their whatever faith they were part of, and then you have some people that start to look for another meaning for life. Uh, Also in 1453, you have the creation of Gutenberg's printing press. So this allows information to be disseminated all throughout Europe. And you've kind of caught the tail end of the information age of the internet, because before the internet and after the internet, the world has become a much different place. And having seen it in both sides, I can attest to the fact that it is a much different world before and after. Uh, Going to do research for a paper I had to write for a class might mean that I spend 3 or 4 weeks in the library going through materials. Now you can basically photograph materials. Look up many materials online, and you can have access to almost any piece of information. Now, the biggest problem you have is nothing. There's nothing there to guard which materials are actually legitimate and which one aren't. So, if you would go into the special collections of the library, they would have everything kind of bound off by primary sources, secondary resources, and you could see people that did this firsthand or, you know, through varying different degrees. Uh, One of the reasons for exploration has to do with going to Asian markets and the amount of money that they can make off of that. So, the Portuguese, uh, the Portuguese are the people that really introduced slavery on a large level to Europe and the Americas. They purchased slaves from West African tribes. So the slaves were captured by other African tribes and they were traded for weapons in most cases. But also they were exchanged for uh, sometimes salt, sometimes metalwork, sometimes statues. It just depended. The Portuguese started the plantation system and they started mixing up the tribes to they didn't want a lot of people from the same tribe going to the same plantations because it would be easier for them to plan some type of revolt, kill the slave owners, and run away or move on to a different area. So the Portuguese found a way to control them from an earlier time. Uh, in Madeira, the Canaries, Sao Tome, and Principe, there were sugar plantations created by Portugal, and then Spain ran them by slave labor. A lot of those islands, by the way, are off the coast of Europe. In Africa, the men planted and the women harvested. And Timbuktu was an early Islamic university in West Africa. One of the oldest universities in the world was Timbuktu. So, and now this means that we're done for the day. It was a pretty short day. We covered a lot of material, and I hope you enjoyed yourself today. We only have like 80 or 90 of these days to go. I know that probably sounds like a lot, so I'll lie and I'll say we have like 5 more. So the lie is that we have 5 more days like this. I hope everyone had a good day. Uh, I hope I get to see all of you in class this year. I've heard wonderful things about all of you, and I hope everyone has a great day. I will talk to you soon, and have a good night.